Hello, welcome to Capital Region Watch. My name is Jack Etkin. It is Monday, June the 16th, 2025. My guest in this segment is Sid Tobias, the mayor of View Royal, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. So, Sid, first of all, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Jack.
Okay, and let's run through these questions. So, number one, why did you run for mayor of View Royal? Was there a particular thing that happened?
Yeah, so I guess 3 years ago now, my neighbor asked me if I would run for the position of mayor in View Royal because the position was to be acclaimed the second time for the mayor that had ran. So nobody had ran against him in 8 years. So he was trying to encourage me to run, and I asked him, well, why didn't he run? And he said, well, I just had a kid. And I said, well, you said that last time. So I guess it was my turn to hop up, and we had a brief discussion, and then he ran away with my nomination papers and had all the neighbors sign them with twice as many signatures as required. And I dropped them off just before the nomination closed. So I ran, I guess, because my neighbors asked me to. I had no political experience before that.
Before you got into public life and became the mayor of View Royal, how did you view local government, and has that changed over the last few years?
Yeah, so I did 25 years in the military. So my sense of community was in a military context, including being a coxswain or the lead chief on a destroyer. And it's, for me, an opportunity, I think, to, as my career in the military started to slow down a little bit, I wanted to be involved in my local community. So I did sit on a few committees with View Royal to understand how it worked, but I thought it's probably the most visible part of government that you see, as well as delivering the things that you see every day, whether it's sidewalks, extra traffic, all of these things that that local governments are responsible for. So I was curious about who sat on them, who made those decisions. And I think it's our first step in democracy to understand, who you're representing to make choices for you in a town. So I thought that was interesting for me to explore.
We're going to talk a little bit about the housing situation here, and I think everybody in Victoria knows that we have an ongoing housing crisis or mess for a lot of people. I mean, many people are completely unaffected by it. Many people have done very, very well from it. But for a lot of people, the housing is a disaster, and the homeless situation that comes out of the shortage of housing is even crazier. So we often hear that building more homes will solve the crisis. Do you think that's an accurate assessment, or is something missing from that?
I think there's something definitely missing from that. My own experience as mayor of View Royal that I felt very challenged with is that a large corporation had come in and bought a low-rise apartment that was affordable. You could see the faces of the people that were living there that worked in grocery stores and local establishments that certainly weren't paying the amount that it would take for you to get a high-end, what they call market rental now. Council approved, that was before I was elected, council approved that property be redeveloped to now be what they call a purpose-built market rental, which means an expensive new apartment. Right. And all of those folks no longer live in View Royal that were displaced from that original. So I guess my concern with housing, are we building affordable housing? Are we building the right housing? Is there an effect of really gentrifying some affordable areas, both for rental housing and rental in apartment buildings? And so that's a real concern for me. I don't think building more will translate into more affordable. On the West Shore, so if we use View Royal, Souk, Langford, and Colwood into that mix, CMHC publishes stats quarterly on vacancy rates. With all of the building that's been going on, we went last year up to, in the last quarter, an 8.9% vacancy rate.
Wow,
that has
that's
tempered
huge.
to be about a 2.9% vacancy rate now.
Can you say that there was an 8.9% vacancy
Yeah, in the last
rate?
quarter of last year for the West Shore for apartments.
Okay.
And that just speaks to the volume and how quickly we're building, right?
Okay.
So now, have prices gone down? Are those apartments filling up? In talking with the owners of some of these apartments, not as fast as they would like. Are they filling up, and they're noticing they're having to bring their prices down a bit. Not significantly to make a noticeable difference, but does more competition on the market mean that we're going to have a positive effect on it, making it affordable? So I think that area concerns me, or like, are we doing the right thing? The other thing, one of the big players are now REITs, or
REITs are REITs, which is a real estate investment trust.
yes.
Investors come in, create a pool of money, and they go out and compete with real people
Yes.
for housing and push prices and rents up.
Yeah, so I think there's been a commodification of our housing needs,
Yes,
right? That has increased prices. And here's a little example in Christie Point, where we have a REIT that's owning an apartment block. The provincial government passed, and I think it was in 2018, a bill to allow an apartment building, even though we've maxed out your rent, if I do a capital project like a new roof or whatever, I can charge that back to the tenants on top of major increases.
Right.
So this is an older building, and they came and petitioned council. Not that council has power over this. This is all provincial government with the tenancy board. And what I found interesting for them is here, REITs are obviously a favored investment, particularly for pension funds, including our own pension fund invests heavily in REITs. And two of the residents in the apartment building were former provincial employees that will likely find themselves in their car because they can no longer afford the place that they're living to, meaning the pension that they're actually getting is being invested in the same thing that's maybe making them homeless. So that, for me, is the dichotomy of some of the corporate messages that we're hearing and the reality on the ground.
But I would say that, to me, I think it's economics 101, that if you do build more homes, and if we had over the past 15 or 20 years,
Yes.
if we had a 3 or 4% ongoing vacancy rate instead of the 1% or less that we've had, and if we had more homes for sale, it should and would bring prices down. So even if they're building high-end homes that nobody can afford, you got to do something with that home sooner or later.
Yes.
And so it's going to go on the market, and it's going to, somehow prices will come down, I think, just by having more supply.
Yeah, and I won't argue the fact that it's not going to hurt, but if we said that supply was the only mechanism to drive housing prices, then LA and New York should be some of the cheapest places to live in the world, and they're not. And the other question that I'd have is, how many of these are vacant right now as investor properties, particularly the condos? And I think there's...
Oh, you mean they've been purchased as an investment?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, I've seen numbers from the OECD that say there are over 1 million vacant homes in Canada. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it never gets talked about, as if, like, the media says, why would anybody in Canada be interested in finding out about that OECD number?
Yeah.
That, over 1 million vacant homes, because that's crazy.
Yeah.
and we just never hear about it, so we don't know what's going on. How has provincial housing legislation affected View Royal in terms of policy and public trust?
Yeah, I think the issue with housing and just to build more housing. So with the provincial legislation that was introduced last year, we've had to rezone all of View Royal, essentially. So on...
Yeah, and for people who don't know, the provincial government has basically come in and completely taken over zoning and said basically the developers can come in and do pretty much what they want
Correct.
in any neighborhood in the CRD.
So every single lot can now have up to 4 units on it, or it could be a townhouse or a houseplex. Or near a transit intersection or transit-oriented area, they can be up to 10 stories with no parking. And we're not talking about a downtown core, we're talking about View Royal here. So normally your trip through View Royal, you spend most of your time in View Royal if you're headed to the West Shore, just because of the convergence of traffic. And yeah, public transit has a ways to go before you could support that type of density. But here we are having to comply with legislation. So we've done what we could both to educate our public about the fact is there's not going to be a public hearing on these things. We're not allowed to have one. The government says we cannot have one.
That's David Eby.
That is the new legislation as well that was just passed, Bills 14 and 15, now say that anything cabinet suggests is in provincial best interest, which could be housing, the cabinet can just approve without local approval at all. So yeah, and part of the irony here is the fastest growing communities have the largest tax rate increases. If you look at Burnaby and Langford now, Langford has had double digits for the past little while, and you hear an argument saying, well, the reason why your taxes are so high is you're just not growing fast enough. And taxes are paid by renters and by homeowners. It's being passed on into the chain. And so there's no new money for infrastructure to support the growth. My biggest concern is, can I offer the same level of services to new builds that I do with existing? And if I have no control of where those builds are going to be, that means it's now up to the town and the current taxpayers to do the connections, whether it's sidewalk or road improvements now for that large development that could be far away from public transit. So the concern, I think, for us is that when you walk around and say, oh, those are new towers, the operational cost is for every 850 people, you're adding another police officer and maybe a support staff for that police officer and maybe another car and maybe another fire engine, maybe a new fire hall. So people don't see those correlations between the increases that greater population brings and welcoming new
So
folks.
the developers come in, they make the money because there is big money to be made.
We wouldn't have any building going on if there wasn't money to be made, and I am not here to cast any shade on developers, because I think it's a noble pursuit of giving us places to live, and that needs to be part of our economy. But there's got to be a better balance. For a long time, local politicians, as well as UBCM or the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, had a heuristic, and that was growth pays for growth. I mean, if you're going to build this big thing here, then you're going to have offsets to take care of sewer and all the infrastructure required to support that growth. These new bills really say existing residents pay for growth, not the new growth.
Do you think people are being meaningfully consulted on what's happening, or is it just top down?
I think from the provincial perspective, it is definitely top down. I mean, The housing minister was on after I was on in CFAX and admitted to using non-disclosure agreements with the Union of British Columbia municipalities and their staff, and it's like. And says it was normal procedure, and it's never been normal procedure to develop legislation or regulations behind closed doors, or figure that it can best be done in cabinet. Like, why would you consider that to be a good idea if the whole idea for legislation is to provide some support and consensus for it going forward? And even to the point where people might point out some flaws in it that might save you politically, or maybe the legislation is having the reverse effect of its intent. So it's deeply disturbing to see a normalization of repression of public engagement. Town halls are meant to be spicy, I think. People come in with big feelings to share them about a number of things. And I think one thing I do pride ourselves at View Royal is we've taken engagement a step further. So we've actually opened our doors more, adopted the International Association of Public Participation's framework and guidelines. Instead of a survey that lasted a couple of weeks on our official community plan, it's now over a year-long process that we're gathering public input, not only from online surveys, but pop-ups and open houses, because we want to hear what people have to say about the future of their community.
Well, what do people think about the growth that's going on, that's coming into neighborhoods and changing them? What do people think about that?
I think they want to be able to welcome new visitors, but also be cognizant of the impact that it has on directly on their lives, you know. And it has to do with, for us, mowing down thousands of trees in View Royal in order to accommodate the new densification. And folks get really upset about that. I think they like trees better than their neighbors in most cases in View Royal. And I think what they're concerned about as well is what are the impacts. So we can't do anything about it, but do we have a sidewalk to connect people that are in wheelchairs that are living in these apartments with public transportation or a place to get groceries? Are there opportunities there that they can accommodate? So they're very much in favor of a more gentle densification. And, you know, developers or proponents talk about, well, by having this densification, you're going to contain urban sprawl by building out single-family homes. And really what we're doing is just replacing what we've built with greater densification. So we're still sprawling. We're just doing it with more people now than we were before.
You end up, though, with a city that, you know, isn't the reason you came to the city in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it's, for me, nothing replaces good urban planning. And I think if you just have too much focus on housing, then you're missing the key points, like where are people going to congregate, celebrate, you know, where do you have enough parks in order to accommodate these folks?
One thing I've noticed is that if you walk, as I often have, between Victoria City Hall and Saanich City Hall, along Government or Douglas or Blanchard, those 3 blocks, and it becomes Oak Street after Mayfair Mall. So if you go between Victoria City Hall and Uptown Mall and Saanich City Hall, which is right there, that whole area is covered by parking lots, huge car dealerships with sprawling parking lots. I've long thought that if you put that land into residential construction, it's close to the malls, it's close to downtown, we could fit in all the people who are coming without doing what they're doing in all the in the neighborhoods in Victoria and Saanich, as well as in the neighborhoods of everywhere else. Have you ever thought about that particular?
Well, we've got our own similar type of issue on what we call, known as a Colwood Strip, which actually is a View Royal up to the casino, right? View Royal has the privilege of having the casino within our town boundaries, but it's a similar straight there, and you've got a major thoroughfare, you've got public transit. You've got a lot of car dealerships, but I mean, I can understand the car dealership's perspective of we don't want to move. But if you take a trip to Europe and you look at a footprint of a car dealership there, the footprint of a car dealership there is you've got usually a parkade beside the dealership. It's a limited capacity. You don't have every color of every model. You've got showcased like one of every model maybe.
Yes.
And they're brought into the showroom so you can take a peek at it and you can take a walk through it. But here it's storage as well.
Yes.
You know,
It's parking lots.
It's a parking lot,
Huge
huge,
parking lots,
vast parking lots, depending on the need. So I think probably the approach to it's great when you've got a lot of land, but you've got to probably ask the question: is what is more economical for you to do? And I think that it comes down to it as land gets more expensive and taxes and whatnot. You may see some changes in some of those larger things that demand more parking to be more condensed.
Yeah. Do you think the housing agenda in BC is being driven more by public need or industry interests?
I think, you know, in View Royal we've got an interesting, perhaps early indicator of some of the housing challenges we were about to face, and it foreshadowed some of the things now. Fort Victoria RV Park is in View Royal, of course, and it's got a wide variety of clients that aren't just overnight; they're long-term, you know, folks that stay there, including some MLAs that work, you know, at the legislature. That from out of town or whatever, they just choose to park a camper here rather than rent. I think, you know, we've had basement apartments, we've had low-rise apartments that are a little bit older, and now I think the discussion is about housing stock, and it's dated and whatnot, and I think that is what is affordable. And what has been affordable for us to help us maintain. So that is my kind of interest. I mean, when you look at the stats of adding new, what did you rip down to build those new? Those need to be subtracted from your numbers. And nobody, as far as I know, has done any indexing to see, we ripped down that low-rise apartment to build this many more units. What was the cost of rent there? And what's the cost of rent now?
We had a professor on from UBC on another show months ago, and he said something we used to do in BC but don't do anymore is a very high tax on profits made from land sales.
Yeah.
And he said if we did that now, he said they've run the numbers, and he said, I think he said a 2-bedroom apartment, if they had this high tax on land, because it would take away the need to raise land prices, because you can raise land prices, but you're not getting the money because it's going to go in taxes. He said a 2-bedroom apartment in Vancouver then would cost about $1,550.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and yet that never gets talked about.
No, I mean, there's an agenda that's being supported by government right now that is very much pro-build, and that's being reflected as well by the federal government right now. And you're right, it has been boom and bust. They often cite, as the current Prime Minister did post-war time when they went into housing creation for the little cubicle houses you see throughout Esquimalt and other areas, that raised families for generations that are still there.
That's sort of where I grew up.
You know, from my perspective, one of the things BC did very well, and we still have legitimate functioning co-ops, right, that were largely funded by the federal government, and CMHC was very supportive of acquiring that. It's harder than heck right now to get a co-op. That's one thing we've asked staff to check out for us, is like, how do we get a diversity of housing in View Royal? Some of the housing concepts, such as co-ops, to me are kind of the right way to go. Now, it does have its limitations through the lifetime of a family in that, you know, so after 30 years, the kids have grown up, you had a 3-bedroom, and you know your husband's gone, and now you're living in a 3-bedroom alone. Yeah. Is there a new way that we could look at ones that have a one bedroom, that have a granny suite that could be attached to those things to make the modular living reflect our needs as we mature as families. So yeah, I think council is very supportive of looking into things like co-op housing, that there's no reason why we couldn't resuscitate.
But it's difficult to do co-op housing now.
It's difficult to do co-op housing. Yeah.
When you were growing up, I assume the Canadian dream had a meaning to you. And do you think that dream is still there today?
Oh, I think it's definitely there today. And the Canadian dream, just to be clear for me, was I was born here but grew up in a little town called Paradise in Nova Scotia, in the Annapolis Valley. And it was owning a farm, a small hobby farm, and it was owning a house. That was the Canadian dream, right? It wasn't a condo, it wasn't a micro suite, it wasn't a market rental. The Canadian dream was to own a property. And I think that's very much alive. When we often talk about how many immigrants or how much immigration we've got coming into British Columbia, as well as immigration from other areas of Canada coming in, we don't seem to talk about the amount of our youth that are leaving for places to chase the Canadian dream. Right, to move back out east, and when I say East Coast, I really mean Nova Scotia and New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland in some cases, that are looking to revitalize their economies and their growth sector, and so I don't think it has died at all. And I think there's a certain anger and resentment that's growing, like, why can't we do this better in British Columbia?
I think we could. Do you think we're seeing a loss of faith in the democratic process, and people don't think the government is interested in listening anymore?
Yeah, I don't think the government makes any attempt to listen anymore, to be honest with you. I mean, we're required to have public hearings. We have to put correspondence that comes in, whether it's an email or what have you, on our council agendas. And it's an open forum, but I think our youth is being disenfranchised by the polarization of politics at this point. When we see what's happening down south, we've got that it's not contained just there. I think you've got parties that aren't really listening to what young people want.
If there's one thing or one hope that you can take away from your work as mayor, what would it be?
I think probably being able to be a bit of a curmudgeon and be critical in our thinking about politics and its effect on our daily lives. I think it's okay to think differently about what people say, and it's more important to look at what they do.
Sid Tobias, Mayor of View Royal, thank you very much for coming on, and thanks everybody for watching this week's episode of Capital Region Watch. Thank you.